Hello, my name is Nadav Tamir. I used to be an Israeli diplomat for many years. I was based in our embassy in Washington, and I was Consul General to New England in Boston. And eventually I was advisor to President Peres in the last 3 years of his presidency. And when he finished his presidency, after 7 years as president and 70 years in public service in Israel, I took a leave of absence and came with him to the Peres Center for Peace and Innovation, where I'm still doing the international relations after his death in 2016. Peres created the Peres Center for Peace in 1996. To remind you, in 93, we signed the accords with the Palestinians, the Oslo Accords. In 95, Peres replaced Rabin as prime minister after the assassination. And in 96, he's losing an elections. And when he finds himself outside government and he thinks, how can I still promote peace? He decided to create a non-for-profit that will complement the peacemaking, the political peacemaking that is more top-down with a bottom-up approach, bringing Israelis and Palestinians together, Arabs and Jews in different ways. For example, the center brought more than 13,000 Palestinian children to life-saving operations in Israel. We train Palestinian doctors for their specialization and subspecialization in Israeli hospitals. We have an education for peace department that is bringing young people, Arabs and Jews, Israelis and Palestinians together around sports, around technology, around arts, to learn about the human side of the other and to learn how to respect each other and to create constituencies for peace. And we have a business department that is trying to remove barriers and obstacles for the economies around us. President Peres strongly believed that both morally and strategically, it's not good for Israel to be an island of prosperity in a sea of poverty. So all of this was going on for more than 23 years, but in 2014, when Peres came back to the center after finishing his presidency, we decided to add another dimension to the center and to create the Israeli Innovation Center in the Peres Center building in Jaffa. We did it for several reasons. First of all, it was clear that even though Mr. Peres was very well known around the world as a peacemaker, received the Nobel Peace Prize, he was also Mr. Innovation and one of the founding parents of the startup nation, always pushing Israel to be on the forefront of innovation and science and creativity. And his career was also very innovative, whether it was when he created the defense infrastructure of Israel for Ben-Gurion as prime minister, or where he saved Israel from hyperinflation as prime minister, or where he really trailblazed the Oslo Accords during the Rabin government. Everything that he did was very innovative. So we thought we have to add this dimension to the center. Plus, being at the presidency, we realized that we don't have a place like this in Israel. Whenever people come, we have a lot to show them about the past. They could go to Yad Vashem or to see the old city of Jerusalem or Mount Herzl, but they didn't have a place to see modern, future-oriented Israel. So we decided that we have to show them the past, the future, and the present of Israeli innovation and how Israeli innovation is changing the world every day for the better, creating tikkun olam on the ground. Because we had an amazing building that was not completely used, because the Peace Center was more of a do tank than a think tank, and the projects were happening outside the building, we had the space. And for the last 2 years, we have an amazing innovation center that you could come and see how Israel contributed to the world and how we became the startup nation. For President Peres, peace and innovation were very much two sides of the same coin. He believed that without creative and innovative spirit, you can never achieve peace through diplomacy. But he also believed that through science and technology and innovation and entrepreneurship, we could change the Middle East and make it more peaceful. He always said that in the Middle East, we have so many problems, but one thing that we have in abundance is young people. 60% of the population of the Middle East are under the age of 30, which means that they're already connected to the digital world through smartphones, and we could reach them. And unlike their parents who are more influenced by incitement and rhetoric of dictators, if we reach them with the Israeli spirit of young people coming together, creating a startup, getting investment, that created the ecosystem that we have here, they will be less attracted to extremism and to terrorism, and they could become much more contributing members of their societies. in general, he believed that the world is moving from an old world that was based on natural resources and territory to a new world that is based more on the human mind. And unlike the old world, where if you wanted more territory or natural resources, you had to take from someone else, in the new world, everybody could become great at the same time. You're not becoming great on the expense of others. And that's why we have in the center the combination of the innovation in technology and also social innovation alongside the values of peace and tikkun olam, because technology on itself could become very dangerous if it's used by the wrong people. But with the combination of the values, it could really move the world forward. Now, in order to share with you why President Peres really thought that Israel became the startup nation, and we actually showcase that when you come to visit, you'll see it in our center. He always said that there are many reasons why Israel became the startup nation, but three major reasons are in the core of our identity and the special sauce that we have. One of them is necessity, the other is diversity, and the third is audacity, or what we call chutzpah. So I'll try to explain each one of them and how it's connected to Israel. So necessity has to do with the fact that when we came back to our ancient homeland, we find out that what we read in the Bible was not exactly true. It wasn't the land of milk and honey. It was more a land of swamps in the north and deserts in the south. And the joke is that if Moses had a GPS, he would probably take the Jewish people to another place in the Middle East because he brought us to the only place where there is nothing. And while most of our neighbors are oily countries, we got stuck with being holy. And what can you do with that? And he used to joke that we have one river that has much more fame than water. You know, Jordan River is deep and wide in the Bible is not exactly true. And we have two lakes, one is dead and the other is dying. But actually, because we didn't have natural resources, we had to focus on what we had, which is the human capital. And we had to be creative, because when you don't have water and you need agriculture, you have to produce drip irrigation, for example. You have to learn how to purify water, and Israel is #1 in the world. More than 90% of the water is being reused. We desalinate water from the Mediterranean. So for example, water was used to be a source of war, and now it's a source of peace. And part of our peace agreement with Jordan, we actually provide Jordan with water. So necessity, of course, was a very important element. And of course, you have to add to that the necessity of being a very small country surrounded by enemies, with no friends in the world, and a lot of hostility. We had to be very creative and innovative to protect ourselves. So defense was another element of necessity that drove Israel to be so creative and innovative. Diversity has to do with the fact that we are, just like America, we are a country of immigrants. Most of the people here came from somewhere in the world, except for the 21% of the Arabs that were here. The Jews, we were all expelled at some point of history and came back. And one thing about immigrants is that they tend to be entrepreneurs by nature, people who leave everything behind and come to a new place and have to start from scratch and have to develop this can-do attitude that we have both here in Israel and in America. On top of that, this amazing fusion that we have with different languages and different perspectives and different colors create a lot of the creative energy in Israel, the land of fusion that you can hear in our music, you could taste in our food. It's all a combination of East, West, old, new, ancient, modern, laid-back Mediterranean, and very dynamic city of Tel Aviv. All of this create also a very creative spirit. And the last thing that I mentioned, audacity or chutzpah, is this thing that we have in our DNA, that we don't respect of authority, we don't like to play by the rules, we are the less disciplined people in the developing world. Something in our nature. I remember when I came to Washington for the first time with my kids, I was amazed by the difference between American kids who sit with their parents and wait for permission to be excused when they leave the table, and the Israeli kids just run from one wall to another like crazy, and if you only can get them to sit, that's a big accomplishment. For some reason, we are very rebellious in our character, and even You know, in the military, I used to be an officer in the IDF. The fact that I had my ranks made nothing to my soldiers. If I couldn't convince them that I know what I'm doing, they wouldn't follow me. And the same for our politicians, that, you know, they tell us to do things and we just ignore it. It makes us very chaotic and I have to say many times also obnoxious, but it's great for creativity and innovation when people always think outside of the box, when they never accept anything as a given. And that's why all those multinational companies, technological companies, created their R&D center in Israel because they understood that Israelis are going to ask the questions that nobody else is willing to ask. And that's how you have a disruptive kind of culture, which is so important for innovation and creativity, and created the startup nation for Israel. Now, Peres really believed that we could become startup nation, not only in technology and science, but also when it comes to diplomacy and to national security. And the reasons why he was able to do it, even though he, like all of us, came from a shtetl and had this traumatic past that we share as Jews, he really believed in optimism. He always said that optimists and pessimists die the same way, but they live very differently. And it's much more fun, healthy, and constructive to be optimists. And I saw in my career with him how he had so much energy because of his optimism. Every day he came to work, he was able to do so much because of this optimism. And I saw that optimism is not just a way to perceive the world, it's a way to change the world for the better. There is a very strong self-fulfilling prophecy in diplomacy that when you say we have no partner for peace, eventually you will have no partner. And when you say the whole world is against us, eventually the world will be against you. But when you inject more optimism and hope, you can make things happen. And hope is the name of our national anthem, Atikva, and Peres really believed in hope. He was also very much about the future and not about the past. He always, when people asked him what was your biggest achievement in life, he always said it is what I'm going to achieve tomorrow, because whatever I achieved already is gone, it's boring. And he always said that he's a young person. And when we asked him, how come young? You're more than 90 years old. He said, because the way to define if you're young or old is not how many years you lived. You have to compare, on one hand, what have I achieved in my life? And on the other hand, what are the dreams of the things that I still want to achieve? And if you have more dreams, then you're young because you're looking forward and not backwards. And he always had more dreams. And he always came to us with another idea that we thought that is a fantasy, and eventually it became true. And that's how he was able to become a leader that uses optimism and use this kind of looking forward and not backwards, and always look for win-win opportunities rather than zero-sum, as well as understand that as Jews, we have to take responsibility and initiative, because he believed that Zionism was about changing our destiny from an object of history to a subject of history. And that means that we could not only remain in the blame game where we blame everybody for our problems, but we actually have to take responsibility and initiative. And that is why he believed that we don't have to wait until the Middle East becomes Scandinavian in order to achieve peace. So with this kind of spirit, he was able to promote peace as a politician, and also to lay the ground for the Peres Center to promote peace through our projects, and now also with the Innovation Center that is also helping us to achieve peace. Just to give you an example, we have an accelerator in Ramallah where we help Palestinian startups to create their own ecosystem, and this is the way to achieve peace. Of course, we will still need the political peace, but the center is doing it every day, and we are very proud that we could implement this vision on a daily basis. So when you come to Israel for the next time, hopefully we will find a technological solution to COVID-19 soon. We will love to host you here and to show you the combination of peace and innovation and the Peres vision here in Jaffa, in our beautiful country. Thank you so much.